Right, one of the uses of probability is to help us to predict the number of times that we'd expect something to happen, or to predict a certain outcome based on some data that we've collected. So let's take a look at this situation here. Let's say that I had a bag, and in the bag I had some different colored marbles. I had red marbles, blue marbles, and green marbles. And specifically, I had 7 reds, 9 blues, and 14 greens. I wanted to play a game with this bag of marbles, and I want to see how many times I would expect to pick out a certain color. So what we can do is we can use this probability to help us to predict how many times we would expect to get each color. So the first thing that we can do very easily here is to find the probability of each color. So let's review very quickly how we'd find the probability. Let's say that I wanted to know how likely it would be for me to pick a red out of this box. I would say the probability of red, we would write it like this. And remember, we're looking for the number of reds, which is 7 over the total. 7 plus 9 plus 14 here is 30. So the probability of picking a red is 7 over 30. I can do the same thing for the other ones. The probability of picking a blue is going to be 9 out of 30. And the probability of picking a green is 14 out of 30. And I should take a look here. It looks like I can actually simplify some of these. 9 and 30 can both be divided by 3. So 9/30 is going to become 3/10. 14 and 30 can both be divided by 2. So that's going to become 7/15. So now I have all 3 of my probabilities in what we call simplest form. Now let's say that I were to pick out 50 marbles from this bag. And every time I picked a marble, I'm going to put it back in. So my situation is pick a marble and then replace it in the bag. Replace it to the bag. So I want to know, or I can figure out how many times I would expect to get some different things. So let's talk about first, how many times would we expect to get red? So how many reds if I pulled a marble 50 times? So we can use a proportion here in order to help us make some predictions. So let's think about what we're talking about here. We're talking about the red marbles. So that's one part of our proportion. And the other part we're talking about is the total number of marbles. So on the left side over here, I already have information. This is going to be my probability. By finding that probability, I can help make some predictions. So I knew that the probability of getting red was 7 reds out of 30 totals. I want to know how many reds would I expect to get, question mark reds, if I picked 50 total times. So I have a nice proportion set up right here. 7 reds out of 30 totals equals how many reds out of 50 totals? So we should be experts at solving these. To find our scale factor, we're going to draw our arrows from what we know to the question mark. We're going to take 50 divided by 30 to give us our scale factor. That's 1 2/3. And then I'm going to take that 1 2/3 and I'm going to multiply it by 7. And I'm going to get that I would expect 11 2/3. So I could round it to say about 12 reds. So there's a situation where I used a proportion to help me make a prediction about how many times something would happen. Let me show you one more. Let's say that I drew something out, or I drew 150 marbles. How many would be green? See if you can solve this before I go ahead and explain it to you. Okay, so again, we want to set up a proportion. On the left side, we know there's 14 greens out of 30 total in our bag. We want to know how many greens would we draw if we drew 150 total. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to find our scale factor here. Our scale factor goes from 30 to 150. So I'm going to take 150 and divide it by 30. That's times 5. To get my answer, I'm going to take 14 times 5, and I'm going to come up with 70 green marbles. Okay. So you've just seen an example of how to find the probability when we're given some numbers or some data, and then how to use that probability to make predictions on the amount of times that something is going to occur.